All right, hello folks. Welcome to Secrets of Golarion. Basically, this is a Q&A session for you to bring all of your in-depth lore questions, or even simple lore questions, that's your call, to us, and then we will answer them to the best of our ability. And
while probably also making snide commentary.
We love that. We do a lot of that. With that, let me just get some introductions out of the way, or start them off. My name is John Compton. I've been working as the organized play lead developer for Paizo, so Pathfinder Society, Starfinder Society, that sort of fun stuff.
My name is Liz Liddell. I am the senior editor at Paizo, and I had the privilege of being a developer on the Second Edition core rulebook.
I'm Adam Daigle. I'm the managing developer of Pathfinder, and I also got to, along with Liz, develop the core rulebook and bestiary and a bunch of other things.
And then they passed that stuff to me and said, make an organized play program.
Yeah.
I got to shake my fist at them. All right, so yeah, this is really driven by the audience, whether it is our live audience or if we can get any questions from Twitch as well, that's always lovely. So raise those hands and we'll see about calling.
If I can, just real quick, questions are brief, contain a question, and end with a question mark.
And one other important thing is, questions that we can answer are going to involve anything except the death of Eridan. We don't cover that. I know, we ruin everything.
And I also heard there's a note of him in the Verizia book. Who is he?
That is a secret for James Jacobs to reveal in his own sweet time. James has a lot of little subplots and threads throughout the entire life cycle of Golarion, because quite frankly a lot of Golarion came from his old campaign for his home group before he joined Paizo or any of that. And I don't even know what his plans are for the Ashen Man.
Probably involves him giggling a lot every time we ask him.
Just like how, in Rise of the Rune Lords, there was the murderer Jervis Stute from Chopper's Isle, and that was tied into this other figure called the Red Bishop at some point, which is just another example of one of James's little personal threads. And sometimes he'll dump the smallest little seed of a thing and then not grow that into fruition for years and years to come.
But I think it's worth noting that that's something that we not only do as developers and professionals at Paizo, but even to an extent when we are writing on things, or even some of our freelancers will sort of incorporate things and comment on them and say, I intend this as an adventure hook. And there are a lot of unanswered things or loose threads in our setting, in part because we want to be able to make sure that you can pick it up and run with it however you like. So you may have your own plan for the Ashen Man. 5 years later, maybe we publish something about the Ashen Man. You can say, not at all what my vision was, but...
Not at my table.
But it all works out. More questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please just come up to the microphone. Hold on.
Is that a wireless microphone? Are we able to take it to people if need be?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Hey guys, so I really like Cosmotal and Arcadia and all the stuff we learned about recently. So I just want to ask, is there anything cool about Arcadia you can tell us that we don't know about yet?
One of my visions, I've been one of the larger proponents of doing Arcadia stuff, and I've recently passed that torch on to Luis Loza because we both share the same interest for it. One of the things that I always wanted to do with Arcadia, because a lot of people will automatically jump to real world analogs, and that's something I'm not a super fan of. I think sometimes it can sometimes be a little lazy, and it can also lead to pitfalls and traps that you don't anticipate. So one of the things I was thinking about with Arcadia, it wasn't ever colonized, it wasn't ever invaded by a foreign power. So it became a very isolationist type nation or continent where they were able to, instead of focusing on defending from outwards or even trying to go outwards, you focused in on the people and on yourselves. And so I always imagined it being slightly higher technology, way different magic, a lot of sense of community within certain groups of people because you need to rely upon each other, but also it has completely wild lands full of monsters because you need threats.
We have a question from Twitch chat from Oil and Green. What were the Uruxi doing while they were off screen in the first edition?
So the Uruxi, in a way, were never entirely off screen. We have a couple different things that... We have a couple different populations, yeah.
I'm going to interrupt once. If you have not read the entire Second Edition Bestiary yet, Uruxi is the name that the lizard folk of First Edition used to refer to themselves.
Yes, indeed. Because why are they lizard folk and the rest of us get to be humans? So we've had lizard folk in the setting for quite a while, and we've had them in a variety of different places. The majority of them have been in Garund, and we've definitely had a lot of presence through a couple of our Pathfinder Tales novels, in particular, drilled down on those, Through the Gate in the Sea and Pool of Radiant Stars. But we've also referenced in the Inner Sea World Guide that there are some things that happen in southern Garund, or really the bottom 2/3 of Garund, that are not mapped, including one of them being a lizard folk nation. So it's not so much that they were doing things and weren't really a part of things. It's just that we are bringing them more to the forefront. So instead of them being kind of off to the sides, they're now emerging more into mainstream societies and will be showing up more as adventurers.
I'll add on to that. Also, a lot of things like we're having the opportunity where we can touch some things that we didn't either have time for, or didn't have the right place for, or didn't even have interest in. As a company, we've grown a lot in the number of developers and creators that we put our stuff into our products, where before it was like the same 4 or 5 guys who were putting in their things that they were super interested in. Like, for example, James Jacobs came up with Varisia, so he really focuses a lot of his stuff on Varisia, while I might be super interested in some other thing. And so that, as I get the power to put more things into books, I do so, and all the other developers do so as well.
And that's kind of a neat thing that happens as we grow our staff, because as we're getting people with different perspectives and different experiences, we're able to bring those perspectives and experiences into our game, and really make a much more rich and deep world out of it. And that's a thing I dig a lot. I really like to see that happen.
From a mechanical angle, also, just consider that lizard folk had been a 2-hit die species in first edition, which made them not entirely player character incompatible, but it came with some baggage from a design perspective. And now that we've moved on to how we work with ancestries, it's a lot easier to incorporate people like the Uruxi into the campaign.
Kind of following from that, do you guys have any information about maybe Gripply culture? Or any plans to use them going further? I really like them, but they just don't show up very often, and I'd like to know more.
The editors love them.
I adore them in part because we've done some Pathfinder Society stuff with them, where I was able to explore things that were then covered further in Blood of the Beast, one of our player companion books. And one of the big things that I tried to push with the Gripplies, which were shown as isolationist and also kind of on the way down. Yeah?
Small frog people.
Liz is very good about noticing these things of we have not introduced these proper nouns. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But there's sort of a question of why are the Gripplies living in isolation, or what are they even doing with themselves? And one of the big tropes that we have in Blood of the Beast, and is explored in season 8, I think it is this notion of fiend keepers. The idea that the way that we've presented the Mwangi Expanse in several places has been oh yeah, there are all sorts of slumbering, terrible things that if you stick a shovel in there, you're probably going to dig up a demon. And so the Gripplies are clearly aware of this, and they have developed this tradition where instead of just sealing it and putting your Final Fantasy runes on there so that it comes back in 1,000 years because plot lines, instead what they do is they use the first edition medium class to create this tradition called fiend keeping, where instead of having a champion or a hierophant spirit that you incorporate into yourself, you have bound a fiend into your body. And the goal is to do as many good actions as you can in your lifetime to try and slowly weather away at the nature of this fiend, to purify it, redeem it, or destroy it in some way without it ever breaking free. And these go on in these generational cycles where you might go through 20 generations of person passing this same Asura Rana down the line, down the line, down the line. And if somebody ever lets themselves become one of those fiend keeper mediums who doesn't stay good or neutral and goes evil, it can take over you and escape. So there's an archetype for that in Blood of the Beast, but that's one of the concepts. Hello, there you have it. You even have the book with you.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
One of the concepts where I wanted to explore with them of what are they even doing? And there's more to them, and because they, and to an extent the Uruxi, have been kind of pushed out of some of their ancestral lands more and more and more as especially as the Chelish have moved into the Mwangi Expanse. There's just been sort of an investigation of what had they been doing and what sort of interesting cultural elements could they bring to the table. Just that they're not the frog people, end of story. What do? I don't know. They ribbit. There's got to be more to it than that.
You are all welcome to come up to the microphone if you have questions. You don't have to wait until it's empty to stand up.
Also, if you feel locked in and don't want to get over anybody's knees, that's a wireless mic. We can bring it to you.
Yeah, just wave your arms around.
Really got a chance.
Hi, I learned about Elfgate from Castrovel in Starfinder, but never heard about it in Pathfinder. Will we see some linked with those gates?
We sure will. In Pathfinder, they're more commonly known as Ayudara. That's the Elven word for them. And as it turns out, the entire first, second edition adventure path, that makes sense.
Oh boy.
The Age of Ashes actually centers around a series of Ayudara and some of the interactions between them. So if that's a concept you dig, that's going to be a really good adventure path for you.
And that was something that was first introduced in the Inner-Sea World Guide, and we never really did much with it between then and now.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of references where if you go digging, you can find them. For example, Mythic Realms has some talk about the Door to the Red Star, because most of the Ayudara seem to go either within Golarion or to Castrovel, but the Door to the Red Star is one that goes to Akaton, where the Contemplatives of Ashok are residing. And so there's some connection stuff there that Mythic Realms explores, while leaving the door open, of course, for more adventures.
We have another question from Twitch chat. It's from Mandoodly. It's been said Pathfinder 2 is a couple years after Pathfinder 1. What happened in Numeria after the change in Iron Gods?
Oh, I edited this section. Let's see how much of it I can remember.
It's all you then.
Also, I will note that we have an entire panel about that called Evolution of Golarion tomorrow.
Probably.
Yeah.
So that's probably the better answer. But in short, sort of, we're assuming that the things that happened in adventure paths have happened. So put up if you're afraid of spoilers, plug your ears for a second. There has been a change in leadership that has had some implications on the political status of the nation. There's some opportunities there. I'm not going to say a whole lot more than that right now because I'm probably going to misremember it.
But I think working off of what Liz said, where a lot of the things that happen in adventure paths are assumed to have happened. Anytime that you give 6 volumes of activity to a bunch of player characters, they bork up all sorts of stuff in that area. So you can imagine there are some changes in Numeria, but there's also a whole lot of the original identities still there to play with.
I saw the number of items in the core book got renamed, like Ion Stones become Aeon Stones, some critters got new names. Is that just trademarkability, or is that a story-wise building?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, there's certainly some parts where it's a matter of trademarking. Like one of the things that we run into with our miniatures line, as well as that we ran into with the adventure card game, is that some of the names that we would use would have to have the OGL, the Open Gaming License, printed along with them. And you cannot print that thing on the back of a card. And certainly not on the back of every card. We prefer to have more artistic designs there.
Or a miniature.
Or a miniature.
Size 0.01 font, maybe. So for that, we come up with some more generic terms. So you may have seen like Force Missile rather than Magic Missile. And Aeon Stone is something that ties in a little bit more to our setting lore, but also it gets away from some older terminology that we wanted to just depart from. Certainly in 4th edition got turned into a deity. I'm less familiar with what Ion's identity was before then.
I think it originally came from Jack Vance.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
And then also, that also helps it sync up more with Starfinder to make the two universes make a little bit more sense together.
Because there are Aeon Stones in there as well. And basically, when we looked at our Aeons in like Bestiary 2, a lot of those are orbital creatures. So we can tie them into those critters too.
And for the critter name changes, one of the things with that is we kind of touched on with the Uruxi, is that catfolk wouldn't necessarily call themselves catfolk, just like we won't call ourselves primate folk. So they need their own internal name just to make a little bit more sense in our own heads.
You guys have had like a decade of APs come out, lots of plot lines, lots of different stuff. Was there any complications going into 2E since you assumed they all took place at the same time, or were they all contained enough that they didn't really step on each other's toes and have anybody's plot lines kind of get messed up, where, you know, something was supposed to be happening during this age, but then 2 years later a similar character was supposed to be in a different AP elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there's been historically a misconception about how our publication dates and how time works in our world. A lot of times it's said, oh, well, things don't necessarily change, but each AP starts in the year that it was published in, more or less. So in relation to the calendar, like an AP that came out in 2012 happens in 4712. And even in campaign settings that come out from that, we've done small incremental changes. We just haven't ever published answers to the big questions of like, what happened, who now rules Corvosa and stuff like that. And for some of those things, they're ones where even though there are 24 adventure paths to address, some of them are ones that don't even remotely begin to talk to each other. It's like, by golly, Curse the Crimson Throne, did you hear that the Stolen Lands has been settled by somebody else on the other side of the continent? So, it doesn't really change what happens in Varissia. It's some rumors, sure, but meh.
Yep. And we have the advantage of having one creative director who's overseeing the process. So if adventure paths happen in the same place, it is intentional and there are continuous threads through that. So it was sort of like resolving one big 3-part story rather than 3 individual stories.
So House Regarvia and a dwarven clan had disappeared in Brevoy. Is there plans to possibly resolve what happened to House Regarvia since now the timeline is advancing and things are happening in the Stolen Lands and Brevoy is on the brink of civil war and all that business? And what's happening with House Regarvia and that dwarven clan that's gone missing?
So House Regarvia disappeared about 200 years ago, as I recall, and basically they were the big power in Brevoy. They disappeared. There was a power vacuum, and now you have Rosalind and Issia going at it. So I don't believe that there are any formal plans this time to really revisit House Regarvia. However, if this is something that interests you, be sure to check out the end of the Kingmaker Adventure Path, which has in its continuing campaign article some opportunities to revisit what happens when Issia gets antsy, or when Chorl the Conqueror, or whatever the Red Dragon's name was, comes back and is like, hey, surprise!
So that's canon then, that Chorl is the dragon?
He wasn't in the.
I might be confusing the two terms because we have the Conqueror itself and the dragon itself. So the end of Kingmaker has those opportunities to explore. I don't want to say anything that'll lock us into any business, but one thing to consider is that although the adventure paths themselves are by and large been canonized, the continuing the campaign pieces usually aren't, because those usually say, how can we stretch this? Like Mummy's Mask has Ulunat, one of the spawn of Rovagug, coming back to and animating into life. That was a fun one to discuss. Okay, Ulunat has not come back to life, but if you had wanted to continue your Mummy's Mask campaign in a big explosive way, that would be the way. Just like how the end of, or the continuing the campaign for Kingmaker is a what if sort of continuation.
Yeah, most of those continuing the campaign articles, which I oversaw for 5 or 6 years, provide more than one potential outcome. So there's no possible way they could all 2 or 3 or 4 be accurate.
When I was reading through the bestiary, the Callborn, I can't remember which book they're from. The bestiary seemed to imply that they just collected memories. The Redemption Engine novel implied that they subsisted on memories. Is it one or the other?
I don't actually think they're mutually exclusive. Yeah. They collect memories, and my understanding of that is that it's kind of a psychic fuel for them, so that they're not necessarily consumed, but that they serve as sort of an empowerment and engagement.
It kind of ties into something. The Pact Worlds book for Starfinder says that there's an enclave of Callborn on Castrovel. Well, if the gap's there, did they starve, or were they like super duper full, like 3 Thanksgiving dinners full?
So let's make sure that we're clear on one thing, at least as far as my understanding of how the gap functions, is the gap didn't stop memories from happening. The gap seems to have purged collective memory of what happened during this time period. So they would still have been around sentient beings, potentially. But
it's like having all the blood sugar pulled out of your blood.
The end of the gap was probably real rough for them.
They clearly came back to collective consciousness with one hell of a hangover. Yeah, and I'm kind of not surprised, because I'm pretty sure the Callborn were the creation of James Sutter, who not only did Redemption Engine and Karamaga stuff, but also wrote 3/4 of the Castrovel article.
We have another question from Twitch, from Seven Laureate. Is there any more information on the third damnation of House Throne?
I should be the one who knows that. I don't know the answer to that. I guess the answer to that is no, we don't have any more information.
Questions? Mics, if you feel.
Yeah, we got one over there if we can ferry a mic over.
Yep.
Thank you.
There you go. You can hand that over to him.
All right. So a little bit lighthearted, but what actually happened that night Kaiden Kallian became a god? Or is it Kaiden Kallian?
Oh,
That's
Kaiden
another
Kallian.
secret.
Oh.
Kaiden Kallian?
Well, that's one of the things about all the tests of the Starstone is they are different, but they also all happen within the Starstone Cathedral, which is its own narrative veil around the Starstone process. My understanding of the Starstone process is that it's a little different for everybody. So what he went through, what Iomade went through, what I'm sure Razmir went through, are all very different. And was he sober enough to even remember to tell us? Not necessarily, but...
Did something happen within the test that made him not remember?
That's also a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one that has a lot of narrative potential to it. I'm actually going to address the unasked question there of pronunciation. I have been working on Paizo products for like 6 years now, and only this past April actually moved to the office and began working in-house with people, and I found out that I pronounce things very differently from most of my coworkers. And so I've actually put some thought into this, in that Golarion is a huge world, and it has people speaking Taldane, common, from all over the world, from all different native languages. And so, of course, people are going to pronounce things differently. And so the fact that I say Serenre, and most of the people in the office say Serenre, is fine.
That sounds like a Serenre perspective.
I will redeem you yet.
You can get your Sun Witch out of here. Come on.
This is like the first few pages of the new bestiary. But I want to ask a little about the convergence, I believe it's called, between Aeons and Inevitables and that whole...
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry. I want to talk about the convergence that was called out in the beginning of the new bestiary, but between Aeons and Inevitables.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of want to know kind of where that came from as like a necessity to kind of have like one set of outsiders per alignment, or if that kind of planned in the past, or kind of where that came from.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So there are a couple different things happening. First off, the Aeons in First Edition had very much a sort of policing perspective or approach, and the more that we explored Axis as well as the Primal Inevitables and the like, the more we sort of looked at these Aeons as approaching much of the maintenance of the multiverse from a lawful neutral perspective. Also, Aeons are something where we were creating those in-house, whereas Inevitables were very much something that we had adopted from previous systems and sort of carried forward, and they have served us really well. But as far as developing more of the Pathfinder and Starfinder identity, Aeons is much more of a space for us to explore. So melding the two together and bringing them under a similar umbrella has made a lot of sense, especially because it allows us to explore a little bit more of communication with Aeons, we hope, which have always been one heck of a time to roleplay at the table, because it's like, okay, well, what would you like? What are your feelings on this matter? And then it just shows you like 15 different images. And you're like, so is that a yes? Which is cool, but it can be hell for a GM.
So I have a question about the continent of Sarusan.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, it hasn't really been explored in any big way. I was wondering if there were any like different races other than the black skin humanoids and maybe the serpent folk who live on that continent. I know it's, used to be connected to Ti and Zhao. Just if you have any information about it, that'd be, nice.
I mean, I guess I think the most important thing about Sarusan is that it has some kind of supernatural effect that causes people to forget everything when they leave.
Yeah. And kaiju.
Yeah, one of the other things I'll bring up with that is that when it comes to these setting books, our setting books are almost always presented in a very indicative and factual way, so that if there's a statement in there, it's presented as though it is fact. So once we say anything about Sarasan, it starts to remove some of the mystery. And Sarasan, as has been kind of passed to me through various conversations, is one of those places on the map that can always remain mysterious. No matter how much we describe of any other nation, any other continent, you will always have Sarasan as the I can make this whatever I want place. And I will always have the Terra Incognita counterbalance over there.
And you will always be right, because we will never say that you're wrong.
Or at least we have no plans in a long time to say that you're
wrong. Mitigated the effects of the Earthfall, but Akavna was described as dying and falling down to form the spire eventually. But Amaznan was described as poisoned and possibly just missing in some weird way. Do you have any information as to what may have happened to him?
Not necessarily missing, he just ceased to exist. Basically spent all of his deific power to do what he can, and part of that was because he felt that Akavna was being too brash in her attempts to try to save the planet.
She just wanted to stab the moon, come on.
Yeah, and then he was just like, oh, you can't do that. And so he was really trying to protect her more so than Golarion, and kind of used up all of his energy and just ceased to exist. Was that in the...
in 123?
Is that in the Aslanti Gods article? Okay, because I don't remember writing that. But I wrote that article.
You sure did.
We have a question from Twitch from Shatreyu. Are there any homelands or empires for non-human races or ancestries outside of where we know them to be currently prevalent? For example, beyond dwarves from beyond the Five Kings Mountain, elves from Kyonin, Wayangs, Kitsune, Samsaran from Tian Xia. Any like expat page populations?
So as far as non-human empires and kingdoms and the like, we do know of Droon, which is an Uruxi lizard folk place that is roughly on the southern tip of Garand. There's still a little bit of flex as far as where those borders are. So I know of that one.
Well, there's a brand new empire, but nation of hobgoblins in the Inner Sea region, taking up part of what had been Multhun and Nirmathas. I've forgotten the name of right now. It'll come to me after the panel.
Anandi?
Oprak.
Oprak.
Anandi,
Anandi, that's right, in southern Garund. There's also an Amarun, a catfolk nation in southern Garund.
And also we still have ideas in-house, and we have, our headcanon and whatnot as far as what certain parts of Kazmaran look like, what certain parts of Vudra look like. And so we have some notions of what might go in there. Non-human major populations and political structures could be among them. But one of the great things about having some of those places not fully fleshed out as of yet is, as we bring in more developers and editors and the like, it is more of an opportunity for newer generations of writers and professionals to be able to put their mark on Golarion. Because our first generation, so to speak, really did one hell of a number on the Inner Sea region. And then when we got around to the campaign setting book Distant Shores, where we had 6 different city gazetteers spread beyond the Inner Sea region, that was very much an opportunity for some of the people who had been hired since then to say, okay, well, here's what some of Arcadia looks like, or for Mark, here's what some of Vudra looks like. For me, it was, here's what some of Iblados looks like. And it was a possibility to expand the map, but also expand the number of voices that were helping to shape what Golarion looks like.
It also,
and Castrovel will likely serve another a similar purpose.
Kazmaran.
Kazmaran.
I mean, Castrovel too, but
yeah.
It also leaves room for you, where if you need to build an empire, if you need to build a Gripply empire, there's room for you to do that.
Hi. So in the introduction for Concordance of Rivals, I am all over that.
We love that
book. Let me tell you, I love it. So in the intro, the survivor, Pharasma, or as you might pronounce it, Pharasma, thank you, was observing the congealing of the multiverse, and then there's this being that looks out at her and gives her visions of the risk of like life becoming unbalanced, or so on and so forth. But I don't recall it ever actually being said. Was that the monad?
Yes. And as the monad, it would never identify itself.
That makes sense. But okay, so that struck me as a very Aeon kind of way of communicating and a very Aeon kind of approach to the multiverse. So I was like, is this the monad? But it never came out and said.
Yeah, so in that opening sort of creation of the multiverse, at least this iteration of it, there's very much Pharasma saying, okay, I saw what happened in the previous multiverse, not going to do that again, nope, 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 nope. She is starting to spin it, it's starting to flesh itself out, and then the monad just sort of emerges from this spiral of cosmic threads, and sort of blinks at her a couple times. She's like, is there going to be a problem? It sends her all these visions that says, this is going to cause all sorts of terrible things. Like, do you want to help fix it? It backs up slowly and starts fixing things. And she's like, okay, I guess we're cool now. And yeah, so when it comes to the Aeons helping to maintain the integrity of the multiverse and to an extent, pointing in that lawful neutral direction, that's the start of it. And everything else that is Aeons has spun out from that moment.
That was a good pickup. That was keen on your part.
All right, I got another one for you. So, and it might be a little bit of a weird one, but time magic exists, right?
Sure.
Spells that affect time exist, and sources no more arcane than the first edition GM's guide reference time travel. How many time travelers are there on Golarion, and what happens if they go into the gap?
I mean, when it comes to
do they come out is a better question.
When it comes to how many are on Golarion, that's very much an at any given moment sort of question.
47.
Adam, we don't tell them those things. now they're going to guess. You're going to start making forum threads about, I think that this person's a time traveler. I would really like to see that thread and see some of your theories, because if you include some theories on that, that would be really delightful reading for the whole office. But yeah, what would happen if they go into the gap? I can come
They
up with
might get
theories.
stuck.
Oh,
well,
that's a good theory. I like that one.
Or it might be that when you leave the gap, no matter how you leave the gap's effects do still affect you.
That's more what I was thinking of. That no matter how you exit, you will still walk through the memory.
The
erasure.
veil, yeah.
Or whatever memories you create in there stay in the gap. What happens in the gap stays in the gap. First rule of Gap Club: you do not talk about Gap Club.
So only barely related to that, I have to tell everyone one of my favorite Easter eggs I ever put into a product that was so incredibly obscure that absolutely no one has picked up on it in like 9 years. Back in the 90s, there was a show, well, there's still a show. There's Art Bell who did this like talking about aliens and all sorts of other stuff. Coast to Coast AM. Anyway, at one point he got this call from this guy named John Teeter who claimed he was a time traveler, and those episodes are wacky, like bizarre stuff. And so whenever I was doing in the Kingmaker book, the town that goes in and out of time, Origin, I named the leader of that town Teeter Restivo, linking back to John Teeter, which only if you are a conspiracy nerd would you ever have gotten that.
Nice Easter egg.
Yeah.
Twitch chat from Pinstripe Barbarian. With the change in setting, has there been a difference in how people view Razmir? Is he more accepted, less accepted? Was there any change in perceptions about Razmir?
Razmir has a tentative alliance with the Gravelands and the Whispering Tyrant, so take from that what you will.
Razmir is definitely one of those figures who, don't get me wrong, is potent, is powerful. When you show up with your 5th level PCs being like, we're going to save the world, Razmir will wreck you. But in the grand scheme of the multiverse, Razmir is insignificant and does not accept it. So Razmir is the sort of person who would get into all sorts of real bad deals and think, beat the system. I got 2 gumballs for this quarter. And then he will get squashed. Are people viewing him with any more acceptance or whatnot? My suspicion is no. Probably in old age, he's only getting even more desperate.
Alliances with undead lich tyrants don't make you friends.
Yeah. It's like when I do cool things, you're gonna make me a lich too, right? Sure. Oh boy! Yay! Mask one forever! I like poking fun at Razmir. He's my favorite.
I want to follow up on the question about Pharasma and the Concordance of Rivals, which is how reliable of a narrator is Tabris, given that he's our only source on like Chronicles of the Righteous, Book of the Damned, Concordance of Rivals.
You're going to get slightly different answers from different people. So on one hand, you will have the school of thought that Tabris is somebody who got a whole lot of really good information, and Tabris sort of claims to have gone through all the steps and checked all of his sources. But this came up a little bit in the Secrets of Golarion panel that we had at PaizoCon, where James and I were both on the same panel, and James emphasized that Tabris got some of his information from Asmodeus, who is a god of lies. So is that reliable? James would say no. I would say that the way that Tabris approaches it is he listened to everything Asmodeus had to say, nodded politely, and then went and fact-checked. So I tend to view Tabris as more of a very reliable narrator. James tends to approach him as a pretty reliable narrator with some possible flaws thrown in there. But the really key thing with Tabris overall is the last spread of Concordance of Rivals, which is a sign-off after all three of the books were written, which is pointing out that Tabris understands and groks so much of the multiverse, but there's still something out there that he could not quite get. And he got it for all of like a few seconds, and then it started to fade away. And for the life of him, he does not understand why or how or whatever. And it leads him to not only believe that there's more out there yet to be discovered by potentially some heroes out there, especially mortal ones. But also, Tabris is somebody who got where he is by going out and investigating for himself and questioning everything. And the notion that you would accept everything of his at face value as the word of truth is antithetical to how Tabris has to operate. So Tabris signs off with, take all of what I say with a grain of salt. Understand that it's real nice salt, but you need to go out and see this for yourself, and don't capital T trust me on things, because that would be a lie to yourself and to me. Go out and figure it out for yourself, especially because this one vexing secret still is out there. And I know what I know what it is, but we're not getting into that here.
Hey, this is a Secrets of Golarion panel. What is it?
Oh, dagnabbit, Liz. I wasn't going to answer if they asked, but now you did.
I know, right? I'm such a jerk.
Jeez, this is a sort of relationship we have with our editors.
we make them fix things all the time.
People here familiar with the alignment axis? People here familiar with one of the approaches to the alignment axis that has a third axis called bacon and necktie, or orange and blue? Okay, so the basic notion is that good and evil, law and chaos, bacon, necktie. What does bacon mean? Well, the answer is it's beyond the scope of our understanding of morality. This is oftentimes used when describing alien sentiences, which are beyond our ability as human authors to really process, much less convey. They show up, they eat all the people, they fly off, and we say, but why did you do evil things? They say, what? Evil? We just did what we do. And so there's a notion that Tabris started to see that the 9-point alignment chart is superficial. That the entire multiverse is broken into a 9-point alignment system, and that it is a lie, or it is only a shadow of what is possible. And he started to see that there is more to morality, more to ethics, than just saying, I am lawful and good. No, there's more to it. And as a former angel, he cannot, for the life of him, process it. If you go into some of those interstitial chapters, he talks about how, like, oh, there's a reflection of good energy that starts to create nirvana. And that in turn basically spawns off outsiders. That's how our cycle of souls goes. Your spirit energy, your soul energy goes to this area, and then it uses it as fuel to create a reflection of itself. So gods cannot know capital T truth. Outsiders cannot know capital T truth because they are confined within this 9-point alignment system. And Tabris started to break that, and as a result, break down, which is why you see him disintegrating, turning kind of unangelic, because he has to discard as much of his immortal essence and alignment identity as possible, even going beyond neutral in the middle, to even begin to understand what this is, and it is killing him. And he has this brief moment where it is on the tip of his tongue in that last spread, but he is unable to transcend the alignment strictures of his own creation. And so, in a way, because mortals are not created from one of the outer planes, it is possible that only a mortal could really ever understand this thing or uncover that secret. But of course, I write the word of Tabris. Tabris is a potentially unreliable narrator, so who even knows if what I am saying here is the ultimate answer. Whatever it is that you want to create that secret to be, it's yours to explore. I just know what my approach is.
This got real deep.
You're saying then that this...
A point I would love to make, until it's in print, nothing's canonical.
Right.
Like, we can have our own ideas
right.
until we write it down.
And publish it.
But
if I create my own answer to this, and then you guys come out with the Chronicles of Bacon, then, you know...
Done.
I keep track of all of these book ideas. Let's go on to the next question.
All right, so one of the things I saw in the new 2E book was obviously the creation of, champions instead of, just bringing up paladins, which I like because I can't stand just playing lawful good paladins. Obviously, is there a lore decision now that we see more of these characters? Because I know, when I was playing Adventure Pass, we'd only see paladin. We wouldn't see like a champion of Asmodeus or Kaiden Kalian, whatever the hell his name is. Whatever.
He doesn't know either.
Pharasma, is there, so it's a two-pronged question. Are we going to see more, is there a reason why, lore-wise, this is happening? And are we going to see more player options for champions of Asmodeus and things like that?
I could speak to the first. I think actually there always have been characters filling this role. They just end up with really weird mechanical underpinnings to make it work because we can't just make them paladins. But there are champions of every deity. And so this is really just a mechanical solution to solve a reality that's been there in our setting the entire time.
That you could have been doing in first edition with War Priest as well.
It's true. As to the second, the framework is there. We haven't published anything beyond that yet. We don't. I'm not sure what's being announced and what's been decided that's going to come, but the framework exists. So whether you build it or we build it, that's there as a tool.
Definitely one of the things from a design perspective. Really early on, there were a lot of talks like, how far do we expand the champion? Do we do a champion for all 9 alignments? Do we do it for the good and neutral ones? Let's see. It was kind of determined that there were a lot of shared aspects between the 3 good alignments that would work really well for the champion as you'll see it in the core rulebook. But there are some mechanics to it that certainly allow the design space later to explore a neutral version of it or an evil version of it. And maybe we'll see it down the line.
They get judged by Pharasma and potentially become angel, devil, demon, etc. If that angel, devil, demon dies, do they get rejudged, or is that no longer applicable to the state they're in?
I think they get absorbed back into the plane.
The quintessence, yeah.
Their quintessence gets absorbed into the plane, which gradually expands that plane, although the planes as they expand gradually come up against the maelstrom, which tears them apart, throws things back into the antipode that sends them back to the positive energy plane, which then spouts through new souls that then disperse through the material plane, get absorbed by new births into new beings who then create their own alignment perspectives and begin the cycle again.
So just a question to follow up on Tabris. He knows how Aerodin disappeared or died, right? He knows that.
Not necessarily. There is a very rough implied timeline of when Tabris was operating, and it's way back when.
A long time ago.
And so Aerodin's death was only a little over a century ago. So just because Tabris has a really great idea of how the multiverse worked back, I don't know, let's say 20,000 years ago, just for funsies, doesn't mean that that is either still entirely true, much less that he is omniscient to anything that has happened since. So I suspect that Tabris probably has many theories of what is true, may have even observed it, or Eridan's death for all I know, but ain't talking at this time.
Is the cycle of souls a closed system, or can energy be lost or added?
This is one where I'm tempted to get into some deep metaphysical stuff again.
Well, let's keep it higher level just so we can get more
All right.
questions.
The basic notion is that it is intended to be a closed system.
Intended.
Yes. In Concordance of Rivals, when Pharasma creates this system, she basically is creating a bubble on the inside of which are growing the outer planes. And then you have the space inside that is the material plane, the elemental planes, all that good stuff, the astral space, with the positive energy in the very middle. So what goes on outside of that bubble is its own thing. And the opening of Concordance of Rivals sort of speaks to her creating the bubble in order to protect this quintessence glob from things beyond. So we do know that there is stuff outside of the known multiverse, and we also know for Zon-Kuthon that when Dubral went on a little vacation outside the bubble, don't go on a vacation outside the bubble, then XYZ happened and Zon-Kuthon came back. So the notion that soul energy could seep through outside of the outer planes, or instead of it getting destroyed by the maelstrom, just gets weathered out and scatters like quintessent dandruff, is entirely possible. And what sort of stories that could possibly tell, that's up to you.
Question from Twitch from Bear Force. Would you each all be able to volunteer a small secret you've personally been excited to tell us about the changeover in editions? Floor-wise.
Specifically about the changeover in edition.
I have one.
Yeah, I think you have a lot more than us, in fact.
So I have a lot of love for Erasni, and Erasni has been very active in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And Erasni continues to be active, and there's stuff there that's coming. So keep your eyes open. You have not heard the last of the unyielding.
I think though that it's great for people to be able to catch up to speed a little bit on Erasni. So where could they read more about Erasni?
Most of what's been happening with Erasni lately has been in the Tyrant's Grasp adventure path, specifically the first 3 or 4 volumes. Four volumes.
And I think it's in volume 4 that has an article about Erasni in particular.
It's actually, I think the second book has the article, and then there's more detail about Erasni and her plans in book 4.
I can't think of one right now. It seems like a lot of the meaty ones we've already kind of talked about on the blogs and stuff.
Yeah, because a lot of the developments that we've done have really been facing the inner sea region, and not yet the stuff beyond. So I'm generally just really excited to see about developing some more stuff for the ongoing Absalom story, which has been very much the domain of Pathfinder Society for the past decade. When it comes to manumission of all the slaves that were there and the various effects that come off of that, to what happened when they tried to use all the cornucopias for the first time after Eridan's death. Things like that. What happened to Primarch gear? These are all great questions.
Here from Angel Tarragon. Is the Gappa disappearance of Golarion an homage to Takaisis and Kirin?
I don't know.
I'm afraid I don't know the reference.
I might be pronouncing them wrong. It's T-A...
Okay. So for Dragonlance stuff, yeah. No, I would say that it is not an intended homage to it. There's definitely Dragonlance in a real minor spoiler nutshell. There's at some point there's god stuff that happens, and the gods keep on being like, "I'm in power. I know I'm in the corporeal flesh. Well, I'm gonna rule the world." And at one point, Takesis basically goes, "You know what? Bleep it." Takes the known world and goes plop somewhere else, and then there are stories that happen from that. So I know about those, but I was not involved in the original conceit of the Gap, so those would have not spilled over. And I don't believe that they were part of the equation.
We got time for about one more question. Who wants the last one? Enthusiasm in the blue shirt here.
Okay.
Where's Nex?
Where's what?
Where's Nex? The wizard.
Where is Nex? I think he's just like hanging out in his demi-plane.
Yeah, I believe he's been in one of his bolt holes for a while.
I mean,
Wow.
he's in there.
When it comes to all these like 20th level wizards with mythic tiers or beyond, if that's what Nex even has, like once they're a couple thousand years in, the question of alive versus other is an open one. So, is he alive? Has he transcended into just a glob of arcane potency? But if you like Nex stuff, or if you like the Tower of Nex outside of Absalom, you can also find out a few more things from Eric Mona's head in the Worldscape comic series, because that does explore the Tower of Nex a bit.
Awesome. You guys have had some fantastic questions. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for all of you Twitch people for tuning in and asking your great questions. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your Gen Con.
And we'll be gathering outside to make room for the next panel that's coming in. But if you have further questions or comments or want to ask us about anything, we'll be
out
outside.
there.